On a freezing December night in New York, one of the most powerful men in Manhattan was about to have his life turned upside down. Victor Ashford, CEO of one of the country's largest tech companies, never imagined that after leaving a business dinner on Fifth Avenue, he would come across two children clinging to each other in a dark alley. The older boy, only 9 years old, was shielding his 5-year-old sister from the biting cold. But it wasn't the fact that they had been abandoned that shocked Victor. It was what that little boy said when he approached. 7 words that pierced through the armor of coldness he had built over decades. 7 words that revealed a secret from Victor's past, one he had tried to bury forever. This is the story of how 2 small angels, abandoned by luck, transformed a millionaire's heart of stone into something he thought he had lost long ago. Humanity, get ready, because what you're about to hear will move you from beginning to end. It was Tuesday, December 12, 2023. Winter was punishing New York with one of the lowest temperatures of the decade. Thermometers read 17 degrees, 8 degrees, and the streets of Manhattan glittered with fresh snow that was quickly turning into dangerous ice. Victor Ashford, 52 years old, walked briskly down Fifth Avenue in his $3,000 designer suit and an Italian wool coat that had cost more than most people earn in a month. He had just left an exclusive restaurant in the heart of Manhattan, where he had closed a $60 million deal with international investors. His driver, Roberty, was waiting at the corner of East 51st Street with the luxury car warmed up and ready. But Victor had decided to walk a few blocks, not because he enjoyed the city, but because he needed to make a confidential call he didn't want even Robert to overhear. As he dialed the number on his phone, Victor turned onto a quieter street, looking for some silence away from the Christmas buzz of the main avenue. Storefronts decorated with twinkling lights and festive wreaths seemed to mock the loneliness he carried inside him, like an invisible weight. Victor Ashford was known across the business world as the ruthless tycoon. His tech company was worth $2.3 billion. He owned 3 penthouses in New York, a mansion in the Hamptons and another in Miami Beach, plus apartments in London and Tokyo. His face had appeared on the covers of the country's top business magazines 3 times, but no one knew the truth. No one knew that behind all that success was a completely empty man. A man with no family, no real friends, only associates and subordinates. A man who returned each night to a 5,000-square-foot penthouse at Columbus Circle and ate dinner alone, staring at Central Park through panoramic windows. At 25, Victor had married Jennifer, his college sweetheart. They had tried for years to have children, but after countless failed fertility treatments and 1 devastating miscarriage, Jennifer had left. Not just the marriage, she had left Victor's life completely. She moved to California, and he never heard from her again. That loss had changed Victor forever. He decided that if he couldn't have love, he would have power. If he couldn't have family, he would have money. And that's exactly what he pursued for the next 27 years. 16-hour days, 7 days a week. He built an empire, and he killed whatever scraps of emotion he still had left inside, or at least that's what he thought. Victor was so lost in thought as he walked down the nearly deserted street that he almost didn't notice the narrow alley between 2 old red brick buildings. Almost. But something caught his attention. A movement. A muffled sound. He stopped, annoyed with himself for getting distracted. He was about to keep walking when he heard it again.
It sounded like crying.
No, more than that. It was crying being deliberately stifled. Victor turned fully toward the alley. The weak light of a distant street lamp barely lit the entrance, but he could make out shapes in the darkness. His first instinct was to grab his phone and call the police. Probably a homeless person, he thought, or worse, some kind of setup. But then he saw them. 2 small pairs of eyes shining in the dark. Children's eyes. Victor's heart, so used to beating in a cold, calculated rhythm, skipped a beat. He took 3 steps toward the alley, using his phone's flashlight to see better. And that's when he saw the scene that would be burned into his memory forever. 2 kids huddled against the frozen brick wall. The older one, who looked about 9 there, wore only a thin basketball t-shirt and torn jeans. His sneakers were so worn out that Victor could see his toes poking through holes in the front. But the most shocking part was that the boy had taken off his own flimsy jacket, useless against the bitter cold anyway, and wrapped it around a little girl curled against his chest. The girl, who couldn't have been more than 5, had her tiny, frostbitten face buried against her brother's chest. She wore a summer dress, utterly inappropriate for the brutal winter, and her skinny legs were bluish from the cold. The older boy held his sister so tightly his arms shook, not just from the freezing air, but from the effort of trying to warm her with his own body. "Hey!" Victor heard his own voice come out rougher than he intended. Are you okay?" The boy's head snapped up, and Victor saw pure terror in his wide brown eyes. The child shrank even tighter against the wall, clutching his sister as if Victor were some kind of monster about to tear them apart. "Please, sir." The boy's voice came out trembling, but there was something in it beyond fear. There was determination, courage. "Please don't take my sister. You can take me, call the police, do whatever you want to me, but don't separate us. She only has me. I promise I'll take care of her. I promise." Victor froze. Something inside him shattered in that instant. Something carefully built and fortified over decades crumbled like a house of cards. He looked at those two abandoned children in a frozen New York alley, and for the first time in 27 years, Victor Ashford felt his heart beat like a human heart again. "I won't separate you," he heard himself say, his voice strangely gentle. "But you'll freeze out here. Let me help." The boy looked at Victor with a mix of distrust and desperation. His lips were purple from the cold, and his teeth chattered so hard he could barely speak. You're not going to call social services, are you? They'll separate us. They always separate brothers and sisters." The boy's voice carried a pain that sounded far too old for someone so young. It was the voice of someone who had already suffered too much, who had already learned the world was cruel and that nobody cared. Victor knelt right there on the icy ground, ruining his $3,000 suit without even noticing. He slipped off his own wool coat and moved closer, carefully as if approaching frightened animals. "What are your names?" he asked softly. The boy hesitated, then whispered, "I'm Lucas, and she's Sophie." "Lucas and Sophie," Victor repeated, feeling something stirred deep inside his chest. "Listen, Lucas, I'm not going to call social services right now, but you need help. You need hot food, a safe place, proper clothes. Let me take you somewhere warm. Please." Lucas looked at the wool coat Victor was holding out to him. It was more expensive than anything he had ever seen in his life. Probably more expensive than everything he and Sophie had ever owned put together. But suspicion still burned in his eyes. "Why do you want to help us?" the boy asked, his voice carrying a hardness far beyond his years. "Nobody helps for free. Everybody wants something." Victor felt those words like a punch to the gut. What kind of life had this boy lived to already believe, at 9 years old, that human kindness didn't exist? What kind of world had turned a child into someone so cynical? "I don't want anything from you," Victor answered, and he realized it was true. For the first time in decades, he was doing something without expecting anything in return. "I just don't want you to freeze to death in this alley." Sophie began to whimper softly, and Lucas immediately turned all his attention to her, ignoring Victor completely. "Shh, Soph, it's okay," he whispered, stroking his little sister's messy blonde hair. "I'm here. You're safe with me. Remember what I always tell you." The little girl nodded through her sobs, her voice weak and trembling. "Just the two of us against the world." "That's right, my angel. The two of us against the world, always." Victor felt his throat tighten. Something about that scene touched a part of him he thought had died long ago. That boy, so small and frail, trying to be strong for his sister, sacrificing his own comfort, his own warmth, his own safety, just to protect her. "Lucas," Victor tried again, his voice gentler this time. "Have you eaten today?" Lucas didn't answer, but Victor saw the truth in the way the boy avoided his eyes. "No, they hadn't eaten." "Probably not today, and maybe not yesterday either. There's a diner on the next corner. It's open 24 hours. How about I take you there? You can eat whatever you want, warm up a little, and then decide if you want my help or not. No strings, no tricks." Lucas bit his lip, torn between pride and desperate need. He looked at Sophie, who was still shivering violently in his arms, and Victor saw the exact moment the boy made his decision. "Just food," Lucas said firmly, "and only because Sophie needs it. This isn't charity. One day, when I'm grown up and rich, I'll pay you back. Every cent." Victor felt something inside him break even further. "Deal," he said, extending his hand. "A loan, then?" Lucas stared at the offered hand for a long moment before giving it a quick shake. His little hand was as cold as ice. 10 minutes later, They were sitting in a booth at the back of a small diner on West 49th Street. The place was simple, with cracked red vinyl seats and formica tables, but it was warm and smelled of fresh coffee and pancakes. Victor ordered practically half the menu. Pancakes, scrambled eggs, bacon, toast, hot chocolate, orange juice, burgers, fries. The waitress, a middle-aged woman named Dolores, glanced at the kids with poorly disguised pity. When the food arrived, Victor watched, both fascinated and horrified, as Lucas pushed every plate in front of Sophie first. He cut her pancakes into tiny pieces, blew on the hot chocolate before giving it to her, and wiped her little face with napkins. Only after making sure Sophie was eating did Lucas allow himself to touch any food. And when he finally did, he ate with a hunger that broke Victor's heart. The boy devoured the food as if he had no idea when his next meal would be, because he probably didn't. "When was the last time you ate?" Victor asked gently. Lucas stopped chewing for a moment, swallowed, and said, "The day before yesterday. I found some sandwiches in the dumpster behind a cafe on Madison Avenue. They were almost good. Sophie ate most of it." Victor felt sick, not at the thought of the children eating from the trash, but at the casual way Lucas spoke of it. As if it were normal, as if it were expected. "And your parents?" he asked, though he already suspected the answer. Lucas's face hardened. "We don't have parents," he said flatly. "Not anymore." "Lucas," Victor began, but the boy cut him off. "Our mom died 3 months ago. She'd been sick for a long time. Cancer. She tried to hide it from us, but I knew. I always knew." His voice trembled slightly, but he kept control. "And our dad. He left when I was 6, just walked out one day and never came back. Mom said he couldn't handle the responsibility." "I'm sorry," Victor said, and he truly was. He felt it in a deep, visceral way that surprised him. "After Mom died, social services came," Lucas continued, staring down at his plate. "They wanted to put us in different homes. Said it was easier to find families for kids alone than for siblings. But I didn't let them. I promised my mom I'd take care of Sophie. It was the last thing she asked me before, the boy's voice cracked, and for the first time, Victor saw tears in his eyes, but Lucas fought them back, blinking rapidly and taking a deep breath. "So you ran away?" Victor asked softly. Lucas nodded. "We were in a temporary shelter. I snuck out with Sophie in the middle of the night. That was 3 weeks ago. We've been surviving on the streets since then." 3 weeks? Victor repeated, stunned. "You've been on the streets for 3 weeks? A 9-year-old boy and a 5-year-old girl? I take care of her," Lucas said defensively, his eyes blazing with defiance. "I've always taken care of her. Even when Mom was too sick, I was the one feeding Sophie, changing her, telling her stories so she could sleep. I can take care of my sister." "I'm not saying you can't," Victor said quickly. "You're clearly an amazing brother, Lucas, but you're still kids. You need an adult. You need a home. Homes split brothers and sisters apart," Lucas said stubbornly. "I won't let anyone take Sophie away from me. She's all I've got. She's everything I have in the whole world." Sophie, who had been quiet the whole time, licking hot chocolate from her lips, suddenly looked at Victor with her big blue eyes and said, "Lucas is the best brother in the world. He gives me his food. And he sings to me when I have nightmares. And he tells me Mom's in heaven watching us." Victor felt tears sting his own eyes. When was the last time he had cried? 27 years ago when Jennifer left? "I can see he's the best brother in the world," Victor said softly to Sophie. "You're very lucky to have him." "And he's lucky to have me too," Sophie said with the innocent confidence of a 5-year-old. "Because I give really good hugs. Want to see?" Before Victor could answer, Sophie climbed onto the booth seat and threw herself into his arms, wrapping her thin little arms around his neck. Victor froze. When was the last time anyone had hugged him? Really hugged him, with genuine affection and not as some social formality. Slowly, hesitantly, he wrapped his arms around the little girl. She smelled of dirt and sweat and cold, but there was something else, something pure and innocent that made Victor's chest ache. "See?" Sophie said, pulling back and smiling at him. "I'm really good at hugs." "You sure are," Victor agreed, his voice hoarse. Lucas watched the whole interaction cautiously, but Victor could see something shifting in the boy's expression. The distrust was still there, but alongside it was a fragile, fearful hope. The hope of a child who had been let down so many times that he hardly dared to believe in anything anymore. Lucas, Victor said, meeting the boy's eyes. I know you have no reason to trust me. You don't know me, and the world has already shown you that adults can't be trusted. But I want to help. Really help. And I won't separate you. That I promise. Everybody promises things, Lucas said, his voice softer now, more tired than hard, and nobody keeps them. Then let me be the first, Victor said. Victor glanced at his watch. It was past midnight. The diner was nearly empty, just a few taxi drivers sipping coffee at the counter. Outside, snow had started falling again, covering the streets of Manhattan with a white, silent blanket. You can't go back to that alley, Victor said, knowing he was stepping into delicate territory. Not tonight. Not in this weather. Lucas immediately tensed, his hand instinctively clutching Sophie's. And what do you suggest? That we go to a shelter where they'll split us up? Where they'll put Sophie with strangers while they send me somewhere else? No, Victor said quickly. Not that I have an apartment. It's big. Really big, actually. Plenty of extra rooms. You could spend the night there, take a hot bath, sleep in real beds, and tomorrow we'll figure out what to do. Lucas eyed him with suspicion. Why would you do that? Nobody brings strangers home, especially not kids from the street. Victor sighed. How could he explain something he didn't fully understand himself? How could he tell this boy that looking at the two of them had awakened something inside him he thought had been dead for decades? Because, Victor began carefully, a long time ago I wanted children. I wanted them more than anything. But I couldn't, and I think maybe God is giving me a second chance to do something right with my life. Lucas was silent for a long moment, his eyes studying Victor's face, as if trying to read his soul. Finally, he asked, Do you promise you won't split us up? Swear it. I swear, Victor said solemnly. On everything sacred, I swear I won't separate you. And if we don't like it, if we want to leave, then you can leave, Victor said, though the very thought of sending them back to the streets made his stomach turn. I won't force you to do anything. Lucas looked at Sophie, who was nearly asleep against him, her little eyes struggling to stay open. The boy let out a deep sigh, and Victor could see the weight of the world on those small shoulders. Fine, Lucas finally agreed. But just for tonight. And I'm staying awake. Just to make sure. You can stay awake if you want, Victor said gently, but I promise you'll be safe. 30 minutes later, they were in the private elevator that opened directly into Victor's penthouse at Columbus Circle. Lucas held Sophie in his arms, his eyes wide as he watched the floor numbers climb. 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. When the elevator doors opened directly into the living room, Lucas let out a small gasp of surprise. The apartment was exactly what you'd expect from a millionaire. Floor-to-ceiling windows with a panoramic view of Manhattan, sleek minimalist furniture, a spotless gourmet kitchen, polished Italian marble floors. Everything perfectly decorated, perfectly organized, and completely lifeless. This is where you live? Lucas asked, his voice echoing in the empty space. Yes, Victor said, seeing his apartment through the children's eyes for the first time and realizing just how cold and impersonal it looked. I know it's kind of empty. I don't get many visitors. It looks like a museum, Sophie mumbled, half asleep. Victor couldn't disagree. He showed them the master bathroom, with its massive tub and multi-jet shower. Lucas looked around with a mix of awe and suspicion, as if expecting it all to vanish at any moment. You can bathe here, Victor said. I'll find some clothes. They'll be big on you, but at least they'll be clean and warm. We take baths together, Lucas said quickly. I don't leave Sophie alone. That's fine, Victor nodded. No problem. While the children were in the bathroom, Victor could hear the sound of water running and Lucas's soft singing to his sister. He went to his bedroom to search for clothes. He found some old t-shirts and sweatpants. They would be huge on the kids, but better than the dirty, torn rags they had on. Then he paused in front of the closet and saw, tucked in the back, a dusty box he hadn't opened in years. With trembling hands, he pulled it out and lifted the lid. Inside were baby clothes, outfits he and Jennifer had bought when they were trying for a child. Tiny onesies, knitted booties, soft blankets, all in pastel blues and pinks, because they hadn't wanted to know the gender in advance. Victor felt a sharp pain in his chest. He had kept these things, unable to throw them away even after Jennifer left, a cruel reminder of everything he had lost. But now looking at those baby clothes, he didn't feel only pain. He felt something else, a possibility, a second chance. He quickly closed the box and returned to the bathroom with the clothes he had set aside. 20 minutes later, Lucas and Sophie emerged, clean, their damp hair combed, dressed in Victor's oversized clothes. Lucas had rolled up the sleeves and pant legs several times, and they looked like two children playing dress-up in adult clothes. But for the first time, Victor truly saw their faces. Without the dirt and desperation, he could see how beautiful they were. Lucas had dark brown hair and eyes, with delicate features that still carried the softness of childhood. Sophie was blonde with bright blue eyes, her heart-shaped face framed by chubby baby cheeks. "You must be exhausted," Victor said. "Let me show you the guest room." The room had a king-size bed, enormous and comfortable, with Egyptian cotton sheets and a heavy, soft comforter. Lucas looked at it as if it were a mirage. "Sophie can sleep here," he said. "I'll sleep on the floor." "No," Victor said firmly. "The bed is big enough for both of you. You can sleep together." Lucas hesitated, then nodded. He helped Sophie climb onto the bed, and she immediately sank into the pillows with a sigh of delight. "It's so soft," she murmured. "Like a cloud." Lucas lay down beside her, but Victor could see the boy was tense, alert, ready to jump up at the slightest hint of danger. "Lucas," Victor said softly, "you can rest. I'll be right out in the living room if you need anything. The door stays open and you can come out whenever you want. Nothing will be locked. You're not prisoners here. Why are you doing this?" Lucas asked again, his voice small in the dark. "Really? Why?" Victor sat at the edge of the bed and looked at the brave little boy who had sacrificed so much for his sister. And for the first time in 27 years, he was completely honest about his feelings. "Because when I look at you two," Victor said, his voice thick with emotion, "I see the family I always wanted and never had. And maybe, just maybe, God is giving me a chance to make right all the mistakes I've made in my life." Lucas didn't answer, but Victor saw something change in his eyes. Something like understanding, like recognition, as if, somehow, that 9-year-old boy could see through all the layers of wealth and success and glimpse the lonely, broken man beneath. "My mom used to say," Lucas murmured, already drifting towards sleep, "that God puts the right people in our lives at the right time, that nothing happens by accident." "Your mom was wise," Victor said softly. "Do you think," Lucas asked, fighting sleep, "that maybe we were put in your path for a reason?" Victor felt tears sting his eyes. "Yes," he whispered. "I think you were." But what none of them knew at that moment was that their journey had only just begun, and the challenges ahead would test them all in ways they could never imagine. Victor woke up on the living room couch at 6 in the morning, his neck sore and his body stiff. He hadn't been able to sleep in his own bed, preferring to stay close to the room where the children slept. During the night, he had checked the cracked open door at least 10 times just to make sure they were still there. That they hadn't run away. That it all hadn't just been a strange dream. The faint morning light was beginning to stream through the massive windows, illuminating the city that never slept. New York was waking up to another day, and Victor knew difficult decisions had to be made. He stood up quietly and went to the kitchen. When was the last time he had made breakfast for anyone but himself? When was the last time that spotless kitchen had been used for anything other than reheating expensive takeout? Victor opened the refrigerator and realized, with a pang of guilt, that he had absolutely nothing kids would enjoy. No milk, no cereal, no juice, no fruit. His fridge contained only imported mineral water, some leftover takeout from high-end restaurants, and a bottle of wine. He was about to pick up the phone to ask Robert to run to the store when he heard a sound in the hallway. Soft footsteps against the marble. Lucas appeared at the kitchen entrance, carrying a still sleeping Sophie in his arms. The boy had clearly just woken up. His hair was messy, and he still wore Victor's oversized clothes. But his eyes were alert, cautious. "Good morning," Victor said softly, not wanting to startle him. "Good morning," Lucas replied, his voice raspy with sleep. Sophie woke up hungry. She always wakes up hungry. There was shame in his voice, as if hunger were something to be embarrassed about. "Of course," Victor said quickly. "I was just about to..." Well, to be honest, I don't have much food here, but I can order anything you want. Pancakes, waffles, eggs? Anything's fine, Lucas said, then quickly added, please. Victor picked up the phone and ordered practically everything a child might want for breakfast. While he waited, he made hot chocolate, the one thing he had the ingredients for, and watched Lucas sit at the table, still holding Sophie. She can sit in her own chair, Victor said gently. I know, Lucas replied, but she likes to stay close to me when she wakes up. She gets scared in new places. As if to prove his point, Sophie blinked her blue eyes open, looked around in confusion, and immediately clung to her brother's neck. Where's Mommy? She murmured, still half asleep. Lucas's face twisted in pain. Remember, Soph, Mommy went to heaven, but I'm here. I'll always be here. Sophie began to cry softly, and Lucas rocked her, humming a gentle tune that sounded like a lullaby. Victor felt his heart break. These children had lost everything, and yet they still had each other. Somehow that was enough. Breakfast arrived 40 minutes later, and the children ate with the same desperate hunger as the night before. Victor realized it would take time for them to get used to the idea that they would have food regularly. It was after breakfast, and while Sophie was distracted watching cartoons on the enormous living room TV, that Lucas approached Victor. Mr. Ashford, the boy said formally, I need to talk to you. You can call me Victor, he said. And of course, go ahead. Lucas took a deep breath. We can't stay here. I know you were really kind last night, but social services must be looking for us, and if they find us here, they'll take Sophie. They'll say you're a stranger, that you can't keep kids that aren't yours. And they'll split us up. Victor had thought the same thing all night. Lucas, and about that, I've been thinking,
what if there was a way for you to stay?
Legally. Lucas's eyes widened. How? Adoption, Victor said simply. What if I adopted both of you? Lucas froze, as if struck by lightning. You want to adopt us? For real. I know we just met yesterday, Victor said quickly. I know it sounds crazy, but Lucas, I can't put you back on the streets, and I won't let them separate you. So if adoption is the only way to keep you together and safe, then that's what I'll do. But you don't even know us, Lucas said, his voice trembling. We might be difficult. I have nightmares sometimes, and Sophie still wets the bed sometimes, and I don't know if I can trust grown-ups. And Lucas, Victor interrupted gently, placing a hand on the boy's shoulder. Nobody's perfect. I'm certainly not. But if you give me a chance, I promise I'll do my best. I'll learn. I'll make mistakes, probably a lot of them, but I will never, ever give up on you. Lucas looked at him with tears in his eyes. Do you promise? Do you really promise you won't split us up? I promise, Victor said solemnly. That's when the doorbell rang. Victor frowned. He wasn't expecting anyone. He walked to the intercom and pressed the button. Yes. New York Social Services, a woman's voice answered on the other end. We're looking for Lucas and Sophie Mitchell. We've received information they may be at this address. Victor's blood ran cold. He looked at Lucas, who had gone pale as paper. No, the boy whispered, panic flooding his voice. No. They'll take Sophie. I told you they'd find us. Lucas bolted toward the living room, clearly planning to grab Sophie and run. But Victor gently stopped him. Wait, he said. Wait, let me handle this. You don't understand. Lucas was trembling violently now. They'll split us up. That's what they do. They always do. Not if I can help it, Victor said firmly. He pressed the button again. One moment, please. Then he grabbed his phone and called his personal attorney, Marcus Chen, waking him from a deep sleep. Marcus, I need you at my apartment right now. It's an emergency. And bring every piece of documentation you can on adoption processes in New York. Victor, it's 6:30 in the morning, Marcus grumbled. What are you talking about? I'm talking about 2 children who need a home, and social services is at my door. I need legal help now. There was a pause. Did you kidnap children? No, Victor nearly shouted. I found them abandoned on the street last night, and now I want to adopt them. But I need you to help me do it the right way. Fine, Marcus sighed. I'm on my way. But Victor, you know this isn't like buying a company, right? Adoption is a long, complicated process. Then we start now, Victor said, and hung up. He returned to the intercom. Sorry for the delay. You can come up. Lucas began to hyperventilate. You called them. You betrayed us. No, Victor said firmly, kneeling in front of the boy so he could look him in the eyes. I didn't betray you. But running won't solve anything. They'll always find you. But if I can show them I intend to adopt you legally, maybe, just maybe, they'll let you stay with me while the process goes through. And if they don't, Victor swallowed hard, then I'll fight. I'll fight with every resource I have. With every lawyer I can pay. I'll move heaven and earth to keep you together. The doorbell rang again. Victor stood and went to answer it, with Lucas clinging to his side and Sophie now awake too. Clutching her brother's hand, on the other side stood two women, one in her 50s, with gray hair pulled into a severe bun and a gray blazer. The other younger, maybe 30, with a gentler expression.
Mr. Ashford?
The older woman said. I'm Margaret Foster, caseworker. This is my colleague, Amy Rodriguez. May we come in? Victor opened the door, feeling the weight of the moment. Every second stretched into eternity. Behind him, Lucas held Sophie so tightly his fingers had gone white. The little girl began to cry softly, burying her face in her brother's chest. Please, come in, Victor said, his voice surprisingly steady despite the chaos inside him. Margaret Foster stepped in with purposeful strides, her eyes already scanning the luxurious apartment with an expression Victor couldn't read. Amy Rodriguez followed, and her gaze went straight to the children. There was compassion there, but concern too. So you are here, Margaret said, her tone professional, though not outright cold. Lucas and Sophie Mitchell. You've given us quite a chase, young man. Lucas stepped back, clutching Sophie even tighter. We're not going with you, he said, his voice trembling but defiant. You can arrest me, do whatever you want, but I won't let you take my sister. Lucas, Amy said gently, taking a small step forward with her hands raised in a calming gesture. No one is going to arrest you. You haven't done anything wrong. We've been worried about you. Lies, Lucas shouted, and Victor saw tears begin to stream down the boy's face. You want to split us up? That's what you said at the shelter. You said it was for our own good. But it's not. You just want to make things easier for yourselves. Margaret sighed, and for the first time Victor saw a flicker of something human in her stern eyes. Weariness, sadness, maybe. Mr. Ashford, she said, turning her attention to Victor. How did these children end up in your apartment? Victor drew a deep breath. Time for the truth. I found them last night. They were in an alley on West 49th or freezing. I brought them here, gave them food and a safe place to sleep. And you didn't think it appropriate to contact the authorities immediately? Margaret asked, an edge creeping into her voice. I was going to do that today, Victor lied partially. But first I wanted to make sure they were okay, that they weren't sick or hurt. Very noble, Margaret said, and Victor couldn't tell whether she was being sarcastic or sincere. But you understand these children are wards of social services, and that sheltering them without notifying authorities can be considered kidnapping. Victor felt his blood boil. Kidnapping? I saved these children from freezing to death on the streets of New York. No one is accusing you of anything. Amy cut in quickly, shooting Margaret a warning look. We're grateful you found them. But now we need to take them back to an appropriate environment while we work on a permanent solution. No, Sophie cried suddenly, her high little voice slicing through the air like a knife. I don't want to go. I want to stay with Lucas. We promised, Mommy. They promised we'd stay together. The girl was sobbing uncontrollably now, her small body shaking. Lucas dropped to his knees, wrapping her up, his own tears falling freely. Shh, Sophie. It's okay, he whispered, but his voice was broken. I won't let anything bad happen to you. I promise. I promise. Victor felt something inside him splinter at the sight. Two children so small, so terrified, clinging to each other like they were all that was left in the world. Because they were... Look at them, Victor said, louder than he intended. Look at what you're doing to them. They just lost their mother. They've lost everything. And the only thing they have left is each other. And you want to tear that away? Mr. Ashford, Margaret said, and for the first time there was a trace of feeling in her voice. I understand how you feel. But there are protocols. There are laws. We can't simply leave 2 children with a stranger, no matter how well-intentioned he may be. Then what if I weren't a stranger? Victor said, the words out before he could think them through. What if I want to adopt them? A heavy silence fell over the room. Margaret blinked, clearly taken aback. You want to adopt these children? You've known them for less than 24 hours. So what? Victor shot back. Does that make what I feel any less real? I look at these children and I see the family I always wanted. I see a second chance, and I'm not going to let it slip away. Amy and Margaret exchanged a look. Amy spoke first. Mr. Ashford, adoption is a long, complicated process. It requires evaluations, background checks, home studies, psychological interviews. It takes months, sometimes years. Then let's start now, Victor said. Today, immediately. I'll take any evaluation you want. I'll pass any check. But please, don't take these children from me. Not now, not when we've just found each other. Mr. Ashford, Margaret said, her voice gentler now. I can see you care, but I need to be honest. You're a single man. You likely work 16 hours a day. You have no experience with children. You're not exactly the ideal profile for an adoptive parent. The words hit Victor like a punch, because she was right. He wasn't the ideal profile. He didn't know how to be a father. He had no idea how to care for children, how to comfort them when they were sad, how to help with homework, how to be what they needed. But then he looked at Lucas and Sophie, still wrapped around each other on the floor, and he understood something essential. He didn't need to be perfect. He just needed to be present. You're right, Victor said, his voice softening. I'm not perfect. Far from it. I work too much. I know nothing about being a dad. I'll probably mess up at almost everything, but you know what I do have? I have love to give. Love that's been locked inside me for 27 years. And I have resources. I can give these kids everything they need: education, healthcare, safety. And more importantly, I can give them what they need most: a home where they can stay together. That's when Lucas lifted his head. His face was wet with tears, his eyes red and puffy. But there was something else in them now. Hope. Please, the boy whispered, barely audible. Please don't separate us. I promised my mom. It was the last thing she made me promise before. Lucas's voice broke, and he began to sob uncontrollably. Seeing her big brother unravel, Sophie started to scream. Mommy, I want my mommy. Lucas, where's mommy? Victor couldn't bear it any longer. He went to the children and knelt beside them, wrapping his arms around both. Lucas resisted at first, then gave in, collapsing against Victor's chest. Sophie did the same. And there, on the cold marble floor of a millionaire's Manhattan penthouse, 3 lost souls found one another. A man who had forgotten how to love, a boy who had grown up too fast, and a little girl who just wanted her mother back. Amy Rodriguez discreetly wiped away her own tears. Even Margaret Foster seemed shaken. Margaret, Amy said softly, we can't do this. We can't separate them now. Look at them. Margaret was silent for a long moment, studying the scene before her. Finally, she let out a deep sigh. All right, she said. All right. But there are conditions. Many conditions. Victor lifted his head, hope blooming in his chest. Anything. I'll accept anything. The children can stay here temporarily, Margaret said, pulling a folder from her bag. But this is only an emergency placement while we process your adoption application. There will be weekly visits. We'll need to run your criminal background, review your financial records, and contact personal references. A psychologist will need to evaluate both you and the children. And if at any point we believe the children aren't being properly cared for— I understand, Victor said quickly. I'll do everything. Absolutely everything. Margaret began filling out forms, then paused and met Victor's eyes. Mr. Ashford, you must understand something. These children have experienced deep trauma. They lost their mother. They were abandoned by their father. They lived on the streets. They will have nightmares, behavioral issues, fears. This won't be easy. Not at all. I know, Victor said, looking down at Lucas and Sophie, now quiet in his arms. But it will be worth it. They're worth it. The weeks that followed were the most challenging, and at the same time the most rewarding of Victor Ashford's life. Margaret Foster hadn't exaggerated. Raising 2 traumatized children was like navigating an emotional minefield. where every step could set off an explosion. On the very first night after the social services visit, Victor was jolted awake at 3 a.m. by screams coming from the children's room. His heart pounded as he sprinted down the hallway, fearing the worst. What he found shattered his heart into pieces. Sophie was sitting up in bed screaming hysterically, completely trapped in some terrible nightmare. Lucas was trying to calm her, but he was trembling himself, his eyes wide with panic.
"Mommy, Mommy's cold."
"She won't move," Sophie cried, her tiny hands thrashing in the air as if pushing away something invisible. "Lucas, why won't Mommy wake up? Why won't she wake up?" Victor understood instantly. Sophie was reliving the moment they had found their mother dead. He rushed into the room but stopped short when Lucas looked at him with desperate, tear-filled eyes. "I don't know what to do," the boy whispered, his voice broken. "She always has this nightmare, and I never know how to make it stop." Victor sat down on the bed and hesitantly opened his arms. "Can I try?" Lucas nodded, stepping back slightly. Victor gently gathered Sophie into his arms. She fought at first, still lost in the nightmare, but Victor began rocking her softly, humming a melody his own mother had sung to him as a child, a lullaby he hadn't remembered in decades. "Shaw, sweetheart," he whispered. "You're safe. Mommy's in heaven now, resting. She doesn't feel pain anymore. And she's watching over you. She always will." Slowly, so very slowly, Sophie began to calm. Her screams turned into sobs, and her sobs into uneven breaths. She nestled against Victor's chest, her tiny fingers gripping his pajama shirt. "I miss her," Sophie murmured, half asleep. "I want her to come back." "I know, darling," Victor said, tears streaming down his own face. "I know." Lucas watched, his expression unreadable, part astonishment, part something else. Relief, perhaps, as if an impossible weight had finally been lifted from his small shoulders. "You did it," Lucas whispered in awe. "You calmed her. I never get her to stop screaming that fast." "You've done an amazing job taking care of her on your own," Victor said gently. "But you don't have to do it alone anymore. I'm here now." For the first time since they had met, Lucas let his defenses fall completely. The boy began to cry, not the controlled, quiet sobs he had allowed before, but a deep, gut-wrenching cry that seemed to come from some old, wounded place inside him. "I was so scared," Lucas confessed between sobs. "So scared they'd split us up. So scared I wasn't strong enough to protect Sophie. So scared of being alone." Victor reached out his free arm and pulled Lucas close, now holding both children in his embrace. "You'll never be alone again," he promised. "Never, I swear." And that night, at 3 a.m, in a room lit only by the dim glow of the hallway, something changed. Something fundamental and permanent. They were no longer a lonely millionaire and 2 abandoned children. They were becoming a family. The days that followed brought new challenges. Victor quickly learned that raising children meant far more than just food and shelter. It meant waking up at 6 a.m. to make breakfast, because Sophie refused to eat unless Lucas was beside her. It meant calling his secretary to cancel important meetings because Lucas had a session with the child psychologist. Margaret insisted he see. It meant going to the mall for the first time in years to buy proper children's clothes, because Victor's wardrobe, even tailored down, was absurdly oversized on them. It meant discovering Sophie was terrified of elevators after once getting stuck in one with her mother, so now they always took the stairs. 50 floors of stairs, every day. It meant learning Lucas couldn't sleep in the dark for fear of waking up to find Sophie gone, so a nightlight now glowed in their room, and it meant confronting his own demons. A week after the children's arrival, Marcus Chen, his attorney, showed up with a stack of paperwork for the adoption process. "Victor," Marcus said, settling into his office, "I need to ask you some hard questions. Social services will want to know everything, and I mean everything." "Ask," Victor said, though a tightness gripped his chest. "Why didn't you remarry after the divorce?" Marcus asked, cutting straight to the point. Victor was silent for a long moment. "Because after Jennifer left, I decided it was easier not to feel anything. Safer. I built a wall around myself and never let anyone in again." "And now?" "What changed?" "They did," Victor said simply. "Lucas and Sophie. When I saw those kids in the alley, something inside me I thought was dead came back to life, and now I can't imagine my life without them." Marcus scribbled notes, Social services will question your ability to balance work and fatherhood. You've always been known to work 16-hour days. How do you plan to change that? I already have, Victor said. I canceled 3 business trips this month. Turned down 2 contracts that would have required my constant presence. I hired a COO to handle daily operations. Because I realized no amount of money is worth more than being there for these kids. Marcus looked impressed. Victor, are you willing to give up everything you've built? I'm not giving anything up, Victor corrected. I'm gaining everything. For the first time in my life, I'm gaining what really matters. By the end of the 2nd week, Victor realized just how far they had come. He was working in his home office when he heard laughter from the living room. Real, genuine laughter. He stood quietly and peeked through the doorway. Lucas and Sophie were on the carpet, surrounded by the building blocks Victor had bought. They were building something together, and for the first time since he'd met them, Victor saw true smiles on their faces. No, Soph, Lucas said, but there was playfulness in his tone. The tower doesn't go upside down. But it's cooler that way. Sophie giggled. It's crazier, you mean? Lucas teased, rolling his eyes, but smiling. Victor felt his eyes sting with tears. Children being children. Something so simple, so basic, yet something stolen from them for far too long. He was about to slip back into his office when Sophie spotted him. Victor, she shouted happily. Come play with us. Not Mr. Ashford, just Victor. And the way she said it, so naturally, so warmly, melted his heart. I'd love to, he said, stepping into the room and sitting on the carpet with them. Lucas eyed him cautiously. Don't you have work to do? Nothing more important than this, Victor said honestly. The next hour was spent building impossible towers, laughing when they collapsed, competing to see who could make the tallest one. It was silly, it was simple, and it was absolutely perfect. Then, as Victor helped Sophie place a block on top of her wobbly tower, she said something that froze the world. Victor, and she said casually, Can you be our new daddy? Time stopped. Lucas froze, his face showing panic as if afraid Sophie had gone too far. Victor felt his throat tighten so much he could barely breathe. Sophie, you can't just ask that, Lucas whispered urgently. Why not? Sophie asked innocently. He takes care of us. He gives us food. He makes us laugh. That's what daddies do, isn't it? Victor knelt down so he was eye level with her. Sophie, he said, his voice thick with emotion, I would be honored to be your daddy. If you and Lucas want that, nothing in this world would make me happier. Sophie grinned wide and threw her arms around his neck. Then you're our daddy now. Victor looked at Lucas over Sophie's shoulder, seeing the storm of emotions on the boy's face. Fear, hope, longing, guilt. Lucas, Victor said gently, I will never try to replace your mom or dad. They'll always be a part of you. But if you'll let me, I want to be someone you can trust, someone who'll be here, always. Lucas bit his lip, tears spilling down his cheeks. Then slowly he nodded, and Victor knew in that moment that no matter what social services said, no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would make it, because they were already a family. Not on paper yet, but where it mattered most. In the heart. A month had passed since that fateful night in the alley, and Victor Ashford's life was unrecognizable. The man who once worked himself to exhaustion now left the office at 5 in the afternoon. The executive who used to eat dinner alone every night now found himself at the table with 2 children, listening to stories about what they'd learned that day. But it wasn't perfect. Far from it. It was a rainy Thursday in January when everything nearly fell apart. Victor had hired a private tutor for the children, since they'd missed months of school.
Sarah Williams, a 50-year-old retired teacher with decades of experience, came every morning to give lessons.
That particular morning, Victor was in an important video conference in his office when he heard a crash from the kids' room, followed by shouting. He hung up immediately and ran to the hallway. What he saw froze him. Lucas was backed against the wall, his face red with anger and tears. Books and papers scattered across the floor. Sarah stood on the other side of the room, shocked and hurt. Sophie was curled up in a corner, crying. What's going on here? Victor asked, trying to keep his voice calm. I hate math. Lucas shouted, his voice high and desperate. I hate it. I can't do it. I'm too stupid. Lucas, Sarah began gently. You're not stupid. You just need more practice. Don't talk to me. Lucas snapped, grabbing a pencil and flinging it at the wall. You don't understand anything. Nothing. Victor saw Sarah flinch, clearly rattled. He moved toward Lucas carefully, like approaching a wounded animal. Lucas, he said softly, what's really going on here? This isn't about math, is it? Of course it's about math, the boy yelled, but his voice was cracking. I'm never going to learn this. I missed too much school. I was taking care of my mom when she was sick, so I skipped a lot. And then we were on the streets. And now everyone's going to see I'm dumb, and you'll realize you made a mistake and you'll send us back. There it was. The real fear, the terror that haunted Lucas every night. Victor knelt in front of him. Lucas, look at me. Lucas refused, eyes fixed on the floor. Lucas, please. Look at me. Slowly, reluctantly, Lucas lifted his eyes. They were red, full of pain. You could fail every subject, Victor said firmly. You could never learn math. You could be the worst student in the world, and I would still never, ever send you back. Do you hear me? Never. You're not something I bought that can be returned. You are my son, and nothing, absolutely nothing, will change that. But I'm not smart, Lucas whispered, fresh tears falling. I'm not good at anything. I'm only good for taking care of Sophie. That's not true, Victor said, feeling his heart break. Lucas, you're one of the smartest kids I've ever met. You survived on the streets for weeks, kept your sister alive and safe, made impossible decisions most adults couldn't make. That takes incredible intelligence. Not the kind that matters, Lucas said bitterly. Not the kind that makes you rich like you. Not the kind that makes people respect you. Victor realized something in that moment. Lucas wasn't just fighting math. He was fighting the feeling of not being enough, of not deserving the love he was getting. Lucas, Victor said, emotion rising in his voice, do you want to know why I got rich? Why I worked so hard all these years? Lucas shrugged, but Victor could tell he was listening. Because I was trying to fill an emptiness inside me, Victor confessed. I was trying to prove I mattered, that even if Jennifer didn't want me, even if I couldn't have children, I still had worth.
So I made money.
A lot of money. And do you know what I discovered? Lucas shook his head. That none of it mattered. Every $1 million deal, every award, every magazine article. It was all empty. Because there was no one to share it with. There was no love, no family. I was the most successful man I knew and the most miserable. Victor took Lucas's hands in his. But then I found you. And for the first time in 27 years, I felt something real. Something true. Lucas, you gave me purpose. You and Sophie gave me a reason to live instead of just exist. So never ever say you're not enough. Because you are everything. Lucas broke. He threw himself into Victor's arms and cried like he had never cried before. Not the restrained, quiet sobs he'd allowed until now, but a deep, wrenching cry that seemed to come from some old wounded place inside him. Victor held him tight, rocking gently, letting the boy fall apart. Because sometimes you have to break completely before you can begin to heal. Sophie, seeing her brother cry, ran over and joined the hug, her own eyes brimming with tears. And Sarah, the tutor, had to wipe her own. After that day, something shifted. Lucas began to slowly lower his defenses. He still had bad days. Days when fear and anger consumed him, but now he let Victor help. He let Victor be there. And Victor learned. He learned that being a father didn't mean having all the answers. It meant staying present even when you didn't know what to do. It meant holding a child's hand through a storm and saying, I'm here, even when you couldn't stop the storm. But the real test was yet to come. It was the anniversary of Lucas and Sophie's mother's death. 3 months since she had passed. Victor knew it would be a hard day, but he wasn't prepared for how hard. Lucas woke up quiet, his eyes far away. He didn't want breakfast. He didn't want to play. He just sat at the window, staring out at a city that moved on, indifferent to his pain. Sophie was clingier than usual, grabbing fistfuls of Victor's shirt and refusing to let him out of sight. She knows, Lucas said later that day, still gazing out the window. Even though she's so little, she knows today is different. Victor sat beside him. Do you want to talk about your mom? About what she was like? Lucas stayed silent for so long that Victor thought he wouldn't answer. Then in a small, fragile voice, he began. She used to sing, Lucas said. Even when she was sick, even when she could barely breathe, she sang to us. She said music was medicine for the soul. She sounds like she was an amazing woman, Victor said gently. She was, Lucas whispered. She worked 3 jobs to take care of us after my dad left. She never complained. She never gave up. Even when she got sick, she kept fighting. For us. She fought so hard for us. Tears began to slide down Lucas's cheeks. And I couldn't save her, he said, guilt thick in his voice. I tried. I tried to be strong, tried to take care of everything, but it wasn't enough. She died anyway. And I failed. Hey, Victor said firmly, turning Lucas to face him. You didn't fail. You were a child. You are a child. It wasn't your responsibility to save her. But I should have done more, Lucas pushed back. I should have. You did exactly what she needed, Victor interrupted. You loved her. You stayed by her side. You took care of your sister like she asked. Lucas, you didn't let her down. You honored her in the most beautiful way possible. Lucas looked at Victor with desperate eyes, searching for truth, for absolution. Do you think she'd be proud of me? For accepting your help, for starting to call you Dad in my heart. Victor felt tears on his own face. I think, he said, voice thick, that she would be immensely proud. Because you chose to live, you chose to give happiness a chance. And that, Lucas, takes a kind of courage very few people have. That night, Victor did something he'd never done before. He suggested they light candles in memory of Lucas and Sophie's mother, that they tell stories about her, that they celebrate her life instead of only mourning her death. They sat on the living room floor, candles flickering around them, and the children shared memories. Lucas told how she always left silly notes in his lunchbox. Sophie said Mommy smelled like vanilla and gave the best hugs in the world. And Victor listened, honoring the woman he would never meet, but who was responsible for the 2 most important people in his life. Thank you, Lucas said late that night when Victor was tucking them into bed, for not trying to make us forget her, for letting us remember. She'll always be a part of you, Victor said, and now she's a part of me too, because you are. 3 months had passed since that first night in the alley, 3 months of transformation, of healing, of love learned. Victor had become proficient at braiding Sophie's hair, at helping Lucas with his homework, at reading bedtime stories every single night. The once empty, cold penthouse had turned into a home filled with laughter, crayon drawings on the walls, which Victor couldn't bring himself to erase, and toys scattered everywhere. The adoption process was moving along well. Margaret Foster had made 6 visits, and although she never said it outright, Victor could see the growing approval in her eyes. The psychological evaluations had been positive. The background checks, spotless. Everything seemed to be leading toward a happy ending. Until one April morning, everything nearly collapsed. Victor was making pancakes. He had become surprisingly good at it when his phone rang. It was Marcus, his lawyer, and there was urgency in his voice. Victor, we need to talk now. Marcus, I'm making breakfast for the kids. Can it wait until... No, Marcus interrupted, and there was something in his tone that made Victor's blood run cold. It can't wait. The biological father has surfaced. The world stopped. Victor felt as if the ground had been ripped out from under him. What? He managed, his voice barely a whisper. Daniel Mitchell. Lucas and Sophie's father. He showed up yesterday. He's demanding custody of the children. Victor gripped the kitchen counter to keep from collapsing. But he abandoned them. He left years ago. He has no right. Legally, he has every right, Marcus said, and Victor could hear the frustration in his voice. He never relinquished his parental rights, and now he's claiming he was just finding himself and that he's ready to be a father. No, Victor said, his voice rising. No, he can't just show up after years and take them away. He doesn't know them. He doesn't love them. I won't let... Victor, Marcus said firmly, breathe. I'll fight for you. We'll fight for this. But you need to understand the gravity of the situation. A biological father has legal priority over a prospective adoptive one. Victor felt sick. He glanced toward the living room door, where Lucas and Sophie were watching cartoons, blissfully unaware of the bomb about to shatter their world. They can't know yet, Victor said desperately. Marcus, Lucas, and Sophie can't know. Not until we have a plan. I agree, Marcus said. But Victor, there's a hearing scheduled for the day after tomorrow. The judge will decide on temporary custody, and we need to be prepared for the possibility that— No, Victor said sharply. I won't even consider that possibility. They're my children, mine, and I'll fight with everything I have. But what Victor didn't know was that Lucas had overheard everything. That night, Victor realized something was wrong. Lucas was far too quiet during dinner, pushing food around his plate without eating. His eyes were distant, haunted. Lucas, Victor said gently, are you okay? The boy didn't answer right away. Then, in a voice that sounded like it came from far away, he asked, He's back, isn't he? Victor's heart stopped. Who? My father, Lucas said, and there was a hardness in his voice that didn't match his age. I heard you on the phone this morning. He's back, and he wants to take us away. Sophie, who had been happily eating beside them, froze and looked at her brother, confusion in her eyes.
Daddy, our old daddy. Sophie, go play in your room for a bit, Lucas said, his voice trembling.
Please. For the first time, Sophie heard something in her brother's tone that made her obey without question. She left the room, casting worried glances behind her. As soon as she was gone, Lucas turned to Victor, tears filling his eyes. But they weren't tears of sadness, they were tears of pure rage. He can't take us, Lucas said through clenched teeth. He has no right. He abandoned us. When Mom was dying, when we needed him, where was he? When we were freezing on the streets, where was he? Lucas, no! Lucas shouted, jumping up so quickly his chair toppled backward. He doesn't deserve to call us his kids. He left us. And now he wants back just because he found out we're living with a millionaire. That's it, isn't it? He wants money. Victor stood too, trying to approach, but Lucas backed away. And the worst part, Lucas continued, his words breaking into sobs now, the worst part is that he'll probably win, because he's our real father. And you're just, his voice broke. He collapsed to his knees right there on the kitchen floor, his whole body shaking with violent sobs. Victor rushed to him, dropping to his knees beside him and pulling the boy into his arms. No, Victor said firmly, holding Lucas's face between his hands and forcing him to meet his eyes. I'm not just anything. I'm your father. Not because a judge signed a piece of paper, not because biology says so, but because I chose to be, and you chose me too. That means more than anything. But what if it's not enough? Lucas sobbed. What if the judge decides he has more rights? What if they take us from you? Victor, I can't lose you too. I can't lose another family. You won't lose me, Victor promised, even though his own heart was breaking. I'll fight. I'll use every resource I have, every lawyer, every law. I won't give up on you. Promise, Lucas whispered, his voice small and terrified like a much younger child. Promise you won't let him take us. Victor wanted to promise, guide how he wanted to, but he also knew he couldn't make a promise he might not be able to keep. I promise, he said, that I will do absolutely everything in my power, and that no matter what happens, my love for you will never change. Never. The next 2 days were a nightmare. Victor barely slept, spending most of his nights in his office with Marcus and a team of lawyers preparing his case. The children could feel the tension in the air. Sophie clung to Victor more than ever, and Lucas grew frighteningly quiet. On the morning of the hearing, Victor put on his best suit, not to impress but as armor. He needed every ounce of strength he could muster. You'll stay with Sarah today, Victor told the children, referring to their tutor. I'll have to be gone for a few hours. You're going to see him, aren't you? Lucas asked. My father. Victor nodded slowly. Yes. Lucas was silent for a moment, then said something that broke Victor's heart into pieces. Tell him, the boy whispered, tears sliding silently down his face. Tell him he's not my father. Not really. Tell him you are. Tell him he can't have us back because we don't want him. We want you. Only you. Victor knelt down and hugged Lucas tightly. I'll tell him exactly that. The courthouse was an imposing stone building in the heart of Manhattan. Victor walked in with Marcus at his side, each step heavier than the last. And then he saw him. Daniel Mitchell was seated on the other side of the hall with his own attorney. He was a man in his early 40s and with graying brown hair, a disheveled appearance. His clothes were wrinkled, his beard unkempt, and his eyes carried the familiar look of someone who had hit rock bottom. When Daniel spotted Victor, his eyes narrowed. There was resentment there, and something else, envy perhaps. "So you're the millionaire," Daniel said, his voice dripping with bitterness. "The man who stole my kids." Victor felt anger boiling inside him, but he kept his voice steady. "I didn't steal anyone. I saved them. From freezing to death on the streets. Streets they were on because you abandoned them." "I didn't abandon them," Daniel said defensively. I needed time. I wasn't ready to be a father." "They were 3 and 7 when you left," Victor said, his voice trembling with restrained fury. "You left a sick woman to raise them alone. And when she died, where were you? When your kids were digging through trash cans for food, where were you?" "I didn't know she had died," Daniel muttered, looking away. "You didn't know because you didn't care enough to find out," Victor said. "But do you know what I do know? I know that Lucas has nightmares 3 times a week and needs a light on. I know Sophie only eats if someone sits beside her. I know Lucas blames himself for his mother's death, and Sophie still cries for her every morning. I know these things because I'm there. Every day. Do you even know your children, Daniel? Do you really know them?" Daniel didn't answer. He just stared at the floor, and for the first time, Victor saw shame flicker across his face. But would it be enough? Would it be enough for the judge to understand that fathers aren't defined by blood or honor, but by presence? By love? By choice? Victor was about to find out. "All rise," the bailiff announced. "The judge is entering," and as Victor stood, he whispered a silent prayer. For Lucas, for Sophie, for the family they had become. "Please, God," he prayed, "don't take them from me. I love them. I love them more than my own life." The hearing was about to begin, and the fate of his family hung in the balance. Judge Eleanor Hartley was a woman in her 60s with gray hair, pulled into a flawless bun and reading glasses hanging from a chain around her neck. Her eyes were piercing, the kind that seemed to see through any lie. She had presided over custody cases for more than 30 years, and Victor knew she had seen it all. But would she see the truth? Would she understand that family isn't defined by blood, but by love? "Case number 2024 FC 8847, Judge Hartley announced, her voice echoing through the courtroom. "Mitchell versus Ashford. Custody of Lucas James Mitchell, 90, and Sophie Ann Mitchell, 5. Victor's stomach twisted. Hearing the children's full names spoken so clinically, so coldly, made everything feel surreal, as if Lucas and Sophie were just numbers in a file, and not the 2 people who had given his life meaning. Daniel's attorney, a thin man named Harold Peterson, rose first. "Your Honor," he began, his voice practiced and professional. "My client, Daniel Mitchell, is the biological father of these children. He never relinquished his parental rights. While he acknowledges past mistakes, he is here today to correct them. He is employed, has suitable housing, and is prepared to resume his responsibilities as a father." Judge Hartley looked at Daniel. "Mr. Mitchell, would you like to speak for yourself?" Daniel stood, nervous, wiping sweaty palms on his pants. "Your Honor, I know I messed up. I know I was a terrible father, but I was going through a really hard time back then. I had problems with drinking, with depression. I wasn't well. And are you well now?" the judge asked, her voice neutral. "Yes, ma'am," Daniel said quickly. "I've been sober for 8 months. I'm in therapy. I have a job at a mechanic's shop. I'm not rich like Mr. Ashford, but I can provide for my kids." "And when exactly did you learn that your ex-wife had passed away?" Daniel hesitated. About 2 months ago. I saw a news piece about children missing from social services. I recognized Lucas and Sophie's photos. 2 months, the judge repeated, a hint of disapproval in her tone. "And it took you 2 months to come forward and claim your children?" I was trying to get ready," Daniel stammered. "I wanted to be sure I was prepared." The judge made a few notes, then turned to Victor. "Mr. Ashford, would you like to speak?" Victor stood, feeling the weight of the entire room settle on his shoulders. This was the moment. This was everything. "Your Honor," he began, his voice trembling slightly. "I met Lucas and Sophie 3.5 months ago. They were in an alley, freezing, hungry, terrified. Lucas was taking off his own jacket to shield his little sister from the cold, And when I approached, do you know what he said? He begged me not to separate them. That was his first concern. Not food and not shelter. That his sister stay with him. Victor paused, blinking back tears. In that moment, I saw something in his eyes that reminded me of myself. I saw someone who had lost everything and still refused to give up. I saw courage. I saw love. I saw a family broken, but fighting to hold together. And what motivated you to want to adopt these children? The judge asked. Because for the first time in 27 years, Victor said, his voice breaking, I felt something real. I'd spent decades building an empire, making money, racking up success. But I was completely empty. Then I found two children who had nothing and yet had everything. They had each other. They had love. And they taught me what truly matters. Mr. Ashford, the judge said, you understand these are not your children biologically, that Mr. Mitchell has legal rights as their biological father. With all respect, Your Honor, Victor replied, a fire lighting in his tone. I completely disagree. Being a father isn't about biology. It's about being there. It's about waking up at 3 a.m. when a child has a nightmare. It's about canceling important meetings because your son needs to see his therapist. It's about learning to braid hair even when your fingers are big and clumsy. It's about holding a crying child and saying, I'm here, and truly being here. He turned and looked straight at Daniel. Daniel Mitchell shares DNA with these children. But me, I share their lives. I know their fears, their dreams, their hopes. I know what makes them smile and what makes them cry. I am there, every day, and I will be there every day for the rest of my life. The courtroom fell into absolute silence. Even the bailiff looked moved. Then Judge Hartley did something unexpected. I would like to hear from the children themselves, she said. Where are they? Margaret Foster, seated as the social services observer, stood. Your Honor, they're at home with a supervisor. We felt it best to spare them the distress of court. Bring them, the judge ordered. Now this decision is about their lives. They have the right to be heard. Panic surged through Victor. He didn't want Lucas and Sophie to see this. He didn't want them to see Daniel, to see the fear in Victor's face, to feel the tension. But he had no choice. 45 minutes later, the courtroom doors opened. Sarah Williams entered first, and behind her, hand in hand, came Lucas and Sophie. Victor felt like he'd been kicked in the chest. Lucas looked terrified, his eyes darting around the room, searching for Victor. When he found him, something in the boy's face softened. And then Lucas saw Daniel. Everything changed. Lucas's whole body went rigid. His hand squeezed Sophie so hard she whimpered. His eyes, frightened a second before, now blazed with pure anger. Sophie, on the other hand, looked confused. She tilted her head at Daniel, as if trying to recall something from a very long time ago. Lucas and Sophie, Judge Hartley said gently, come here, please. You don't need to be afraid. I just want to ask you a few questions. Lucas walked forward, pulling Sophie along, but his gaze never left Daniel. He looked ready to fight, ready to protect his sister from any threat. The judge leaned forward, her tone softer. Lucas, do you recognize this man? She asked, pointing to Daniel. Yes, Lucas said, his voice hard. He's Daniel Mitchell, my biological father, the man who abandoned us when I was 6 and Sophie was 2. Daniel flinched at the words, but Lucas wasn't done. He promised he'd come back, the boy continued, his voice beginning to shake. He promised he was just leaving for a little while. Mom cried every night for months. Then she got sick, and he never came back. Not one call, not one letter, nothing. Lucas, Daniel began, tears rolling down his face now. I'm so sorry. I was sick. I wasn't well. You have no right to talk to me, Lucas shouted, his voice echoing through the courtroom. You have no right to apologize. Where were you when Mom died? When she was so weak she could barely get out of bed? Where were you when we had to live on the streets? When Sophie cried from hunger and I had nothing to give her? Where were you? The entire room was stunned. Even Judge Hartley looked shaken by the raw pain in Lucas's voice. I was here, a voice said. Everyone turned. Victor had stood, tears streaming freely down his cheeks. I was there when Lucas had nightmares about his mother dying, Victor said. I was there when Sophie woke up crying at 3 a.m. I was there when Lucas had a breakdown because he thought he wasn't smart enough. I was there for every tear, every fear, every moment of pain. And I'll be there for every moment of joy, too, For every victory, every smile, every happy memory we still get to make. Victor walked toward the children and knelt between them. Lucas and Sophie, I know you're scared. I know this is the hardest day since we met. But no matter what happens in this room today, I want you to know something. He cupped their faces and looked into their eyes. You are my children. Not on paper yet, maybe never on paper, but here. He pressed a hand to his chest. Here you will always be mine, and I will always be yours. No one can take that away. No judge, no law, no one. Because love isn't something that can be ordered or denied. Love just is. Sophie began to cry and threw her arms around Victor's neck. I don't want to go. You're my daddy. Not the strange man. And Lucas, who had been so strong, so brave, finally broke. He collapsed into Victor's arms, sobs racking his body. Please, the boy begged, not to the judge, but to Victor. Please don't let him take us. Please, Daddy. Please, Daddy. He had called him Daddy, not Victor. Daddy. Victor held both children, fighting to be strong for them even as he was falling apart inside. Judge Hartley discreetly dabbed her own eyes. Daniel was openly crying now, his face buried in his hands. Mr. Mitchell, the judge said, her voice softer. Would you like to say something? Daniel lifted his head. His eyes were red, his face twisted with pain. When he spoke, his voice was broken. I ruined everything, didn't I? He whispered. I thought I could come back and they'd still need me, that I could still be their father. But I'm not anymore. He looked at Victor holding the children, and something changed in his gaze. Not envy, not anger, recognition, and maybe gratitude. They already have a father, Daniel said, tears falling freely. And it isn't me. I don't deserve to be. Your Honor, I'd like to relinquish my parental rights, voluntarily. The silence that fell over the courtroom was deafening. Every eye was on Daniel Mitchell, who had just made the hardest declaration of his life. Judge Hartley removed her glasses and cleaned them slowly, a gesture Victor realized was her way of buying time to process emotion. When she finally spoke, her voice held something that rarely appeared in a courtroom, pure compassion. Mr. Mitchell, she said gently, do you understand what you're saying? Relinquishing parental rights is permanent, irreversible. You will never again have legal rights over these children. Daniel nodded, tears still falling. I understand, Your Honor, and it's the right thing to do. Maybe the only right thing I've done for them since they were born. He looked at Lucas and Sophie, still clinging to Victor, and there was so much regret in his eyes that even Victor felt a tightness in his chest. Lucas, Daniel said, his voice breaking. Sophie, I know I have no right to ask your forgiveness. I have no right to ask for anything. But I want you to know that I've always loved you. I just didn't know how to show it. I didn't know how to be the father you deserved. And when I look at you now with him, he pointed to Victor, I see something I never managed to give you. I see safety. I see love. I see a home. Lucas stayed silent, his body still tense. But Sophie, with the innocence only a 5-year-old possesses, asked, Are you going away again? The simple question hit Daniel like a bullet. He dropped to his knees right there in the courtroom, sobbing. Yes, sweetheart, he managed. I'm going away. Because you deserve better. You deserve someone who's present. Someone like your new dad. Victor felt something break inside him, not from pain, but from a deep understanding. Daniel wasn't a villain. He was a broken man who had made terrible mistakes. And now, in the hardest moment of his life, he was making the right choice. Daniel, Victor said, and everyone looked up, surprised. It was the first time Victor had called him by name, not Mr. Mitchell, not with anger. Thank you. For loving them enough to let them go. That takes more courage than anything. Daniel looked at Victor, and something passed between the two men. An understanding. A reluctant respect. Take care of them, Daniel whispered. Please, give them everything I couldn't. I promise, Victor said solemnly. Judge Hartley tapped her gavel softly. So ordered. Daniel Mitchell voluntarily relinquishes all parental rights over Lucas James Mitchell and Sophie Ann Mitchell. And given the extraordinary circumstances of this case, and having heard the children's own testimony, I am expediting the adoption process. She looked directly at Victor. Mr. Ashford, your evaluations have been exemplary. Your references, impeccable. And more importantly, it's obvious to anyone in this room that these children love you and you love them. Therefore, by the authority vested in me, I grant you immediate legal custody of Lucas and Sophie, pending finalization of the adoption paperwork, which shall be completed within 30 days. Victor couldn't process it for a moment. 30 days, not months, not years. 30 days. Your Honor, he said, his voice trembling. Thank you. Thank you. Don't thank me, the judge said. And for the first time, she smiled, warm and genuine. Thank these two extraordinary children, and the man who had the courage to make the impossible choice. She looked at Daniel, still on his knees. Mr. Mitchell, I will recommend you continue therapy and recovery programs. Perhaps one day, if and when you are truly ready, these children may choose to have some kind of relationship with you, but that will be their choice. Always. Daniel nodded, unable to speak. The judge brought the gavel down one last time. This case is closed. Good luck to you all. What happened next was a blur of emotion. Lucas and Sophie clung to Victor, crying and laughing at the same time. Margaret Foster, the social worker who had been so strict at the beginning, came over with tears in her eyes and said, "Congratulations. You're a real family now." Marcus, the attorney, shook Victor's hand so hard it hurt, but Victor barely noticed. He was too busy being squeezed by two pairs of little arms that seemed like they would never let go again. When they finally stepped out into the bright April sun, something extraordinary happened. Daniel was standing on the courthouse steps, clearly waiting for them. Instinctively, Victor pulled the children closer, but Daniel raised his hands in peace. I just wanted to say goodbye," he said. For real this time. Lucas looked at the man who had been his father for so long, and was now a stranger. And then something incredible happened, something that revealed the depth of that 9-year-old boy's heart. "I hope," Lucas said slowly, choosing each word carefully, "that you find peace. Truly, I hope you heal. And if one day you can, if you really change, maybe we can talk. Not as father and son, but as people who share a history." Daniel sobbed, covering his face with his hands. "I don't deserve your kindness." "No," Lucas agreed, and there was wisdom beyond his years in his voice. "But I deserve peace, and holding on to anger will only hurt me. So I'm going to try to forgive, not for you, for me." Victor had never felt so proud. His son, yes, his son, was showing more maturity and compassion than most adults ever could. Sophie, ever the sweetest, took a small step forward and offered her tiny hand to Daniel. "Bye," she said simply. Daniel took that little hand, memorizing the feeling, knowing it might be the last time. "Bye, princess," he whispered. "Be happy. Please, be happy." Then he turned and walked away, down the courthouse steps and into the Manhattan crowd. Victor watched until he disappeared completely, feeling a mix of sadness for the man and immense gratitude for the chance Daniel had thrown away, and that had been given to him. "Shall we go home?" Victor asked, looking down at the two children beside him. "Home," Lucas and Sophie said together, and never had two words sounded so sweet. 6 months later. It was a sunny October morning, and Victor's penthouse at Columbus Circle had been completely transformed. The once bare walls were now covered with framed photos. Lucas and Sophie at the park. Lucas proudly holding up an A on his math test. Sophie on her first day of school. The three of them together on their summer trip to Disney World. The minimalist furniture had given way to a loving, organized chaos. Baskets of toys, children's books everywhere, an entire wall dedicated to Sophie's drawings. The apartment that had been a cold showroom was now a loud, messy, utterly perfect home. Victor was in the kitchen making pancakes, his specialty now, when he felt 2 pairs of arms wrap around him from behind. "Good morning, Dad," Lucas said, and Victor's heart still skipped every time he heard that word. "Good morning, my loves," he replied, turning to kiss the tops of their heads. Ready for the big day? Today was the day the adoption would be officially finalized in court. The day Lucas and Sophie would stop being Mitchell and become Ashford, officially, legally. "Forever. I'm nervous," Lucas confessed. 10 years old now, he'd grown several inches and filled out. His cheeks were no longer hollow, and that constant shadow of fear had left his eyes. He looked like a happy kid. Why? Victor asked, serving pancakes. What if it's a dream? Lucas whispered. What if I wake up and none of this is real? Victor knelt in front of him, as he had so many times before, and held his face in his hands. This is real, he said firmly. As real as the love I feel for you. As real as the family we've built. And nothing, absolutely nothing, will take that from us. Sophie, wearing her favorite princess dress because she insisted on wearing it to court, bounced with excitement. Today I'm going to be Sophie Ashford. It sounds like a princess, doesn't it? It sounds perfect, Victor smiled. The courtroom was full, not just with the necessary people, but with those who had become part of their journey. Marcus and his wife, Sarah, the tutor, Robert, the driver who was now basically an uncle, Margaret Foster, who had become an unexpected friend, Amy Rodriguez from social services, even Dolores, the waitress from the diner where it had all begun. And when Judge Hartley, who had specifically requested to preside over this final hearing, brought down the gavel and declared, "By the powers vested in me by the state of New York, I hereby declare that Lucas James Ashford and Sophie Ann Ashford are now legally and permanently the children of Victor Thomas Ashford. May God bless this family." The room erupted in applause. Lucas cried. Sophie squealed with joy. And Victor? Victor felt as if his life finally made sense. They took the official photo, Victor in the middle, Lucas and Sophie on either side, all three smiling so wide their faces hurt. That picture would be framed and placed in a place of honor in the living room, a constant reminder of the miracle that had happened. Later that night, after the guests had left and the excitement had settled, the three of them sat on the couch watching the sunset through the huge windows. "Daddy," Sophie said sleepily, snuggled against Victor's chest, "do you think Mommy knows that we have a new daddy?" Victor felt Lucas tense beside him, and he chose his words carefully. "I think," he said softly, "that your mom not only knows, she's smiling from heaven, because her greatest wish was for you to be happy and safe. And you are. Do you think she likes you?" Lucas asked, a vulnerability in the question. "I hope so," Victor said honestly, "because I'm taking care of her greatest treasures, and I'm going to keep taking care of them until my last day." Lucas nestled closer. "You know what's funny? For a long time I was so scared of forgetting her, but now I realize I won't. She's here." He touched his heart. "Always. But there's room here for you too. Hearts don't have a limit, you know?" Tears slid down Victor's face. "No," he agreed, his voice thick. "They don't." They sat like that until the stars appeared. Three people who had been strangers less than a year ago and were now an inseparable family. A family not made by blood, but by choice, by love, by destiny. And that night, when Victor tucked the children into bed, as he did every night, and never grew tired of, he paused in the doorway and watched them sleep. Lucas lay on his side, one arm draped protectively over Sophie even in sleep. Sophie clutched the teddy bear Victor had given her on that first day. They looked so peaceful, so safe, so loved. "Thank you," Victor whispered, not sure exactly to whom. To God, to fate? To the children's mother somewhere above. "Thank you for giving them to me, for giving me a second chance, for teaching me what truly matters." And there, on the threshold of his children's room, Victor Ashford, the man who had once had everything and nothing at the same time, finally understood the simple truth he'd been searching for his whole life. Wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in moments. Success isn't defined by achievements, but by connections and love. Love is the only thing that makes life truly worth living. He had been a lonely millionaire. Now he was simply a father, and there was no title in the world he valued more. Did you like this story? Did Victor, Lucas, and Sophie's journey move your heart? Which moment touched you the most? When Victor found the children in the alley? When Lucas finally called him Dad? Or when Daniel relinquished his rights, knowing it was best for his children? If this story touched you, leave a like below, and subscribe to the channel and turn on the bell so you don't miss any story like this one. We've got many more tales of resilience, love, and second chances waiting for you. Tell us in the comments, do you believe in destiny? Do you believe certain people enter our lives at exactly the right time? And if you've experienced a family formed by love rather than blood, share it with us. We love reading your stories. And don't forget to binge the other stories on the channel. Dozens of moving tales that'll make you laugh, cry, and believe in the power of love. Thank you so much for watching to the end. Your presence here means the world to us. See you in the next story.